Now, what do our classical scholars say about Ya'juj and Ma'juj? So, firstly, is the term Arabic or is it non-Arabic? Our scholars, some of them said that the term is Arabic and it comes from ajja. Ajja ya'ujju ajjan. So, ajja means to kindle fire. Ajja means when the fire spurns outwards. However, in my humble opinion, it is not sound to read in Arabic meanings to proper nouns that are found in the Quran and Sunnah. Because Arabic is a language that has come, in the time of our Prophet, it reached its pinnacle, but it wasn't around 10,000 years ago. It was another language back then. If you know the study of linguistics, if you know language, languages evolve. Languages are things that are fluid. Language never stays the same. It is something that comes and goes, and all languages are interconnected in the great family of languages, and you have these, language bundles, if you like, the Afro-Asiatic language, the Semitic and Hebrew languages, the Romance languages. You have these language bundles that are all interconnected, and interestingly enough, footnote here, they all go back to one language. There is the mother of all languages. And why are we talking about languages? Let's get back to Ya'juj and Ma'juj. So, they say that Ya'juj and Ma'juj goes to Arabic, and I say, I'm not buying it. It's a classical noun. It has very little to do with Arabic. As well, the term Ya'juj and Ma'juj is found in pre-Islamic literature, Gog and Magog. It is found, it is pre-Islamic, Gog and Magog. And it is mentioned in the Old Testament, Gog and Magog, and in the New Testament. The book of Revelations mentions the release of Gog and Magog, that Gog and Magog are going to gather for the battle. So this is in the book of Revelations, and this predates Islam. So there's references to Gog and Magog that they're going to gather for the great battle as well. So the Old Testament mentions Gog and Magog, the New Testament mentions Gog and Magog, and the Midrash mentions Gog and Magog. What is the Midrash? The Midrash is like the tafsir literature for the Jews. The Midrash is the commentary on the Torah, and it consists of legends and fables that go back many, many centuries before Islam. You have the Babylonian Midrash, you have other Midrashic texts. So the Midrash is pre-Islamic Jewish exegesis. It is tafsir literature that is ancient. It's not the Torah. It is the commentary of the Torah that the ancient sages, the rabbis, the ulama of the past, they commented on. And in the Midrash, you find some very, very interesting literature, which is not the time to go into, but there are parallels with the Quran and Sunnah, which you can, anyway, let's not go down there. So where are we? So, Midrash. The Midrash mentions Gog and Magog. What does the Midrash say? The Midrash says that there will be a forerunner to the Messiah. We talked about the concept of Messiah in Judaism, remember? You guys remember, right? And Moses Maimonides put belief in the Messiah as a part of his 13 points of Aqeedah. Is it the 11th or the 12th point? We're going to believe in the Messiah. A day will come when the Messiah will come. It is a part of Jewish literature. What I didn't tell you in that class 2 weeks ago, because it's not related, but now I should have mentioned it in hindsight, they actually, or some segments of Judaism, believe in two types of Messiah, the minor Messiah and the major Messiah. Now that we're talking about Gog and Magog, I have to bring this up. So they say that there will be a forerunner to the real Messiah. And this forerunner will defeat Israel's enemies. When they say Israel, they don't mean the country, they mean Bani Israel. Remember this, right? When the Midrash says Israel, they mean mu'mins, Muslims, i.e. Jews from their perspective, you understand? They don't mean the country. So they say that this Jewish messianic precursor, the minor Messiah, will defeat Israel's enemies, Gog and Magog, and then the real Messiah will come, and then judgment will take place, and then the righteous will be rewarded, meaning with Jannah, if that's their reward. Now, this is interesting because this is Midrashic literature, and it mentions two figures. And it mentions Gog and Magog, and it mentions Judgment Day, all in the same paragraph. Allahu A'lam, we have the Mahdi, we have the Messiah, we have Gog and Magog, we have Yawm al-Qiyamah, all in the same paragraph as well. We find those things. Now, I did mention briefly there are two ways to interpret these things. If you're a secular, agnostic, atheist, if you're a person who believes in history and not God, then you will say, look, Muslims, Jews, they are taking from one another, right? And that's the standard interpretation of modern day academics. The great flood is a myth that transcends all civilizations according to modern historians. As I had mentioned, I think earlier, the great flood is a myth. I'm saying as a secular historian, it is a myth that transcends all civilizations. Every civilization believes in a great flood. You can analyze this and say, okay, this means it's a common folklore literature. The Old Testament has it, the Quran has it, native Indians has it, the Aborigines have it. So there is a myth of a great flood. Or you can flip it around 180 degrees and you can say the reason why all of these civilizations have the myth of the great flood is because it's not a myth, it's a fact. You can flip it around, and that's what we would do. So the fact that the Midrash mentions the pre-Messiah, Gog and Magog, the Messiah, Qiyamah, and Islam mentions it, could be the source is the same. Maybe that's why there's so much parallel between the two. So Gog and Magog is mentioned, we said, in the Quran and Sunnah. It is mentioned in the Old and New Testament. It is mentioned in Midrashic literature. How have our historians understood Gog and Magog, Ya'juj and Ma'juj? Ibn Kathir mentions, let's try to finish this up today because I don't want to go too late. Ibn Kathir mentions that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are from the children of Adam. They are Bani Adam. They are not an alien species. They are flesh and blood like us. And some of our early historians, and this is not Quran and Sunnah, this is just folklore and history, they say Ya'juj and Ma'juj goes back to Yafith ibn Nuh. Yafith ibn Nuh. Now, this motif is biblical and it is found in the Tabi'un. It's not in the Quran and Sunnah. It is biblical and we find it in our early history. And that is that Noah had 3 sons. Sam and Ham and Yafith. This is a common motif that is found in the Old Testament. It is something that the Semitic races believe in, and it is found not in the Quran, not in the Sunnah, but in where? Early Islamic historical traditions. Which is why we don't necessarily have to believe in it. If it was the words of Allah and His Messenger, سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. If it's the word of a tabi'i, or even a sahabi, because this is history and it's not ilm al-ghayb, we don't have to accept it. So this issue we find it in the Tabi'un, that Noah had 3 sons. Sam, Ham, and Yafith. And from Sam, we get the Semitic peoples, the Arab and the Hebrew race, and also according to this interpretation, Faris and Rum, the Persians and the Romans, right? Hence why, again, bit of a tangent. Problem is I love these tangents and I don't have time. See, that was a bell. Don't go into these tangents here, huh? Back in the 1910s, when there was race laws in America, there were race laws in America. Hitler got his race laws from America, by the way. A tangent upon a tangent, there you go. There was a problem. How do we classify Arabs? How do we classify Arabs? How do we classify Desi log? A Hindu sued in the Supreme Court. And he argued, I'm not making this up. You can look this up, a famous case. I forgot the title. Singh versus this. No, it wasn't Singh. I'm joking. That was just a joke. I was scrap that. But it was a Supreme Court case. Supreme Court case. And he argued that he is. What do you think he argued? Aryan. Very good. Yes. Very good. Exactly. He argued he's Aryan. Aryan mean Caucasian. In fact, he said, I am the Asli Aryan. You guys are Naqli Mal. I'm the real guy. And he used these race theories, and from this as well, Middle Easterners said, well, we are Caucasians. We are the descendants of Sam. They brought in the Bible. We are this. So this is now a theory that they had. And that is why to this day, some people say if you're Arab or Desi, you're technically Caucasian. And in fact, all of this is a little bit antiquated, to be honest. These views and whatnot, they don't add up scientifically. So all of this is anyway. But the point is, this is the notion that Sam is Semitic. And Ham is the father of the Barbar and the Qibt and the Sudan. So African peoples, Ham. And Yafith is the father of the Atrak and the Slavs and the Ya'juj and Ma'juj. So the Russians and the Mongolians and whatnot are Yafith. To be brutally honest, this entire trope smacks of racism. And it's not found in the Quran and Sunnah, and it seems to be biblical, and it seems some of our early commentators copied and pasted from the Old Testament, which is actually very common. There's a genre called Israeliyat, where some of our earliest scholars, they would study the Midrash and they would study the Jewish folklore. And at that time, the Jewish folklore was considered to be a civilization worthy of admiration and respect. So they would take this and then speak it in Arabic to the masses, and the people would think that this is a part of Islamic folklore, even though it is coming from the Midrash. And this is well known, but I'm not inventing this up. It's called the Israeliyat. Look this up. So Allah knows best. I am very skeptical of all of this in any case. So Ibn Kathir says they are the children of Yafith. That's what I'm trying to say. All of this was that. And this is the standard interpretation of the majority of our medieval scholars. The fact that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are Bani Adam, it seems pretty clear from our tradition. Bani Adam means human beings. And we learn this from a number of evidences. Of them is the famous hadith in Bukhari itself, where Allah says to Adam, "O Adam, take the people of hell to hell, and he shall take his children." And that's when the 999 will go. So the fact that his children includes Ya'juj and Ma'juj shows that they are Bani Adam. Okay, now we have some really bizarre interpretations that are found in our books. And again, we have to be a bit more discerning. Just because it's written in Arabic doesn't mean it's the gospel truth. Pun definitely not intended. Just because we find it in an ancient book doesn't mean anything. We find ancient books written in our tradition that mention bizarre stories, truly mind-boggling. Some of the earliest books like Ka'b al-Ahbar and others. And there is a tradition found that once Adam had a wet dream and his fluid fell on the earth, and that earth sprouted forth and it became Ya'juj and Ma'juj. So we find this in our folklore, and we find it in respectable medieval books. And that's why, dear Muslims, we do need to be critical of our own tradition. We do need to be. Our ancient scholars were not infallible. We respect them, wallahi we do. But they were people of their time and place, and we need to look at it in our time and place and be cognizant of their humanness as we are cognizant of our humanity as well. So this is also found that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are Bani Adam but not Bani Hawa. Go figure. In any case, getting back to Ya'juj and Ma'juj, time is so limited, I have so much to say. Let's see if we can summarize this. To be brutally honest, standard medieval interpretation of Ya'juj and Ma'juj is the following. This is what you find in Ibn Kathir. You find it in the tafsir literature of As-Samarqandi and of Al-Tha'labi, and basically this is the mainstream interpretation for our classical and middle ages of Islam. Ever since the beginning of writing tafsir, let's say 300-400 Hijrah, up until pre-modernity, up until going to CE 1800s or whatnot. If you look at any book of tafsir, any book of history, the notion was the following. Ya'juj and Ma'juj are a bizarre, exotic tribe in the nether regions of the world that have been trapped by Dhul Qarnayn thousands of years ago, and they're still trapped to this day. And quite a few medieval historians have reported that I know of a friend of mine who traveled to the end of the world and he saw with his own eyes the wall of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. We find this in respectable Islamic books. The notion that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are a living tribe, blocked to this day behind the wall that was built 4,000, 5,000 years ago. That wall miraculously is still there. People can see on the one side, and on the other side you have these savages that Allah knows how they're eating, drinking, replicating, whatnot, and they're still there for eons and eons and eons. This is the standard interpretation of our scholars of the tradition, not of the Quran and Sunnah. You understand what I'm going to get at, okay? We don't blame them. In their time frame, the world was unexplored. In their time frame, nobody traveled the world. The reason why Marco Polo became famous and Ibn Battuta became famous was because they traveled half the world. That's it. And they became world famous because they did what nobody had done. They simply went from one side of the known civilized world to the other side, and they came back. Marco Polo to Naples, to Italy, or to Sicily, wherever he was. Naples or Italy, where was he? And Ibn Battuta to Tunisia, where he was from. So people didn't travel. And folklores and legends were very common, and it was easy to believe these types of things. That there is this nether region of... And you know, if you read, by the way, even Ibn Battuta, by the way, you find bizarre fables. You find belief in mermaids, and you find weird creatures and whatnot. This is what he believed. He really believed that there are races and aliens, or not aliens, but you get my point. This is the notion of his time. Marco Polo as well, he believes these types of things. So it's not surprising that our medieval scholars believe this type of stuff. Now, obviously, dare I say, anybody who knows science and geography and modern civilization, you cannot believe that there is a tribe for 4,000 years trapped behind a wall. I mean, if you believe this, that's your position. I cannot believe it. I find this very difficult to believe. So this has led people to do multiple things. We have 20 minutes left. I have to wrap it all up now, subhanAllah. The first interpretation, which is the standard interpretation of medieval Islam, is that, okay, maybe there are places in the world that are undiscovered. Maybe there is a race of people locked up behind the Caucasus Mountains or in Mongolia or whatever, and they're still over there. And Greenland, Greenland, interesting. How would Dhul Qarnayn get to Greenland? Because he's traveling. فَأَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا. He didn't go on a ship, he walked on a road. So that kind of, it's not the Bermuda Triangle, no. But many Muslims still believe this. I have nothing to say to this. If you believe it, I have nothing to say. I don't believe it, is all I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to dismiss any person's belief, and this is the belief of medieval scholars. If you still believe that there's a big wall that is lasting for thousands of years, and by the way, no human structure is that fortified for 4,000 or 5,000 years that nothing happens to it. Even the Great Wall of China needs to be built up or whatnot. I mean, it doesn't work that way. But anyway, if you believe, and anyway, so this is, what can I say? If you believe it, you believe it. I am somebody who, what can I say? My mind doesn't believe this. Others have said, we need to reinterpret Ya'juj and Ma'juj metaphorically. And this goes back to another thing that I kept on stalling when we talked about the Dajjal, because I wanted to talk about it with Ya'juj and Ma'juj. And that is this newfangled interpretation, and it is newfangled, you do not find it in pre-modernity. This is a very modern interpretation. It only begins in the 60s and whatnot, and it has now become common, very common, so much so that many famous people, many mainstream people are explicitly or implicitly saying it in this land and in some islands in the Bermudas as well. There's a famous person who is well known for this type of theory, no names mentioned, it's not my philosophy to mention names typically, where they say Dajjal and Ya'juj and Ma'juj are symbolic. Symbolic. It's not an entity. Dajjal is, he will say, globalization. And Ya'juj and Ma'juj, they might say Russia and America, the superpowers. And honestly, I mean, okay, jokes aside, I admire the fact they're trying to salvage the tradition, because they understand that mainstream interpretation doesn't make sense. So they're trying to salvage the tradition, and they say, you know what? Dajjal is a demonic force. Dajjal is a global empire. Dajjal is the new world order. Then you get into the triangle and the eye and this and that, and the whole rabbit's hole begins. You can now, once you go down the rabbit's hole, make dua, there's nothing to be done once a person goes down that hole. What can I say? If a person believes this as well, the problem comes. The same traditions that you get the concept of Dajjal from, those same traditions tell you a lot about the Dajjal. So you can't pick and choose and reinterpret everything. Either you reject Dajjal in totality, which some progressives and modernists have done. Dajjal is not mentioned in the Quran. They reject all hadith. So they say, khalas, let's be done with. and they reject Ya'juj and Ma'juj hadith. So they say, well, the Quran just mentions 2 tribes, so they're going to come, some races will come and have a big war. Fair enough. If your principle is you're going to reject hadith, that's not ours. If your principle is no hadith, then you can derive an entire interpretation that is independent of mainstream Sunni Islam and be gone with it. But the deal of these folks is they claim to be Sunnis, and they are popular in Sunni circles, and they are trying to metaphorically reinterpret these traditions. And we say that I don't think in this case you can have your cake and eat it as well. It's nice too. I love to have my cake and eat it as well. But in this particular case, I don't think it is methodologically sound. Because the same traditions that tell you about Dajjal, tell you about Ya'juj and Ma'juj, they have all of these details we mentioned. And it's pretty vivid, the impression given, right? Dajjal will be killed by Isa, one-on-one. The blood of the spear will be shown. It's clear. Ya'juj and Ma'juj, the corpses will be piled up. I mean, those same traditions mention what we have just mentioned. So I'm not too sympathetic to this reinterpretation as well. Is that clear? I personally don't buy it. A third interpretation, and this became common. The first person I know who said this was back in the 50s. Maybe reformed, but at first I know, back in the 50s. He said that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are the Chinese race. And the great wall that was built by Dhul Qarnayn is the wall of China. And this notion spread as well back in that era, because he as well, the scholar, again I grant him credit that he realized the traditional interpretation doesn't make sense. So he said, we need to rethink through this. So he attempted to rethink through, and frankly for his time and place it was a bold move, because he was criticized by mainstream Sunnism. Mainstream Sunni scholars said, no, we believe in this and that. But he wanted to again salvage the tradition. Of course, what is the problem with believing that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are the Chinese folks and the Great Wall in the Quran is the Great Wall of China? What is the problem with this interpretation? Who can tell me? I like this. Chinese Muslims, no, that's not the biggest problems. We have other bigger problems than this. That's not a problem in this case. I mean, where does one begin with the problems of this interpretation? Where does one begin? There are so many problems with this interpretation. I mean, of the problems of this interpretation is that we know exactly who built the Great Wall. And he wasn't a believer in Allah. Jin Shu Shuao, he wasn't a believer in Allah, the famous emperor. He was one of the pagans of the, Shinto, whatever religion it was. And the Great Wall was actually built to protect the Chinese people from within, not from without. And the Great Wall is not a barrier that is impenetrable. People go in and out all the time. In fact, gasp, shock, I myself have gone in and out of the Great Wall. I in fact did a video that went viral 2 years ago. I took a group to China 3 years ago. And I stood on the Great Wall, and I have a video, YouTube clip. Is the Great Wall of China the wall of Ya'juj and Ma'juj? You can look at it yourself. And I said, no, it's not, don't worry. It's not the Great Wall of there. So, this as well, it doesn't make sense, neither heads nor tails, Nasar naper, literally, neither heads nor tails. Doesn't make any sense. The wall of Ya'juj and Ma'juj is not the wall of China in any stretch of the imagination. It doesn't make sense as well. Where does this leave us? Another group of, let's finish this one. I know I promised Q&A. Let me finish this up. Another group says, and this is something that I have heard myself, some ulama say, that perhaps Ya'juj and Ma'juj are not on earth but under earth. That's why the satellites haven't discovered them. And this, again, I appreciate the salvaging, I really do. But how can human beings survive? No vegetation, no plants with the sun, no oxygen, food, drink, thousands of years. And according to these traditions, we're talking about gazillions of people. What is the answer to this conundrum of Ya'juj and Ma'juj? I will disappoint you by saying there is no clear-cut answer. But wallahi, to struggle with the truth and to admit the struggle is a safer position than to invent something that is far-fetched and then pretend that it is answering the problems. I don't have a solution to Ya'juj and Ma'juj. I am personally skeptical, maybe because of my own upbringing and my own, I have a degree in engineering, I understand mathematics and chemistry and geology, and I just find it, now you can quote back, Allah ala kulli shayin qadir. And I say, indeed, Allah ala kulli shayin qadir. But are we obliged to believe that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are billions of people under the earth? This is my point. If the text told us explicitly, sami'na wa ata'na. But when the texts don't tell us this, can we rethink through and say this? So I conclude with two opinions. The first of which is plausible, the second of which is even embarrassing to mention, but I will mention it. As for the plausible one, Allah knows best. Perhaps, this notion of a living tribe of Ya'juj and Ma'juj is not correct. Because if you look at all of the traditions, there is only one tradition that is in Tirmidhi with one isnad that mentions the Ya'juj and Ma'juj are daily digging. And every single day they're told to go back. All the other traditions don't mention a living Ya'juj and Ma'juj. As for the hadith in Bukhari that the wall has been opened, that could be a wall. It could be, in this case, see to what level of metaphor is allowed? Ijtihadi. If it were to be said, a wall has been opened is a metaphor that indeed Ya'juj and Ma'juj is now closer to you. Personally, I don't see this as that much of a stretch than to interpret all the hadith to mean Ya'juj and Ma'juj are symbolic in nature. But again, it's ijtihadi. The only tradition that mentions Ya'juj and Ma'juj are alive right now, and they are digging through every single day, is a solitary narration in Tirmidhi and also in other books, but the same isnad. And I did my research for this because this is problematic, and I have to say I was relieved to find classical scholars, some of them did problematize this hadith. Ibn Kathir amongst them, who said that this tradition seems to be it's an illah or a hidden defect, that it is not from the Prophet ﷺ. It might be coming from the Israeliyat, because Abu Hurairah also studied with Ka'b al-Ahbar. Ka'b al-Ahbar was the son of a rabbi, and he would narrate Israeliyat, and Abu Hurairah would listen to him and narrate, and one of the students of Abu Hurairah assumed it to be from the Prophet ﷺ. This is Ibn Kathir saying this, not me. So he said, perhaps this is from the Israeliyat. And this is what I firmly believe, simply because it is highly problematic to posit that there are billions of people somewhere in today's world clawing away. So the first interpretation, which is posited by a group of people, let's just leave it like that. A very wise person once said, let's just leave it like that. The first interpretation is that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are a group of people that will come towards the end of times. And they will wreak havoc and do this and that. So we get ourselves out of the problem of them being alive right now. And as for the wall of Dhul Qarnayn, there was maybe their biological ancestors, maybe some other tribe that had those characteristics, and they were trapped by Dhul Qarnayn. That did happen. But we don't have to affirm that they are still trapped 5,000 years later. Rather, maybe their descendants, maybe people similar to them, so they are called Ya'juj and Ma'juj, are them. This is the first interpretation. And I am very sympathetic to it, and it seems, and it solves many of our problems. There is another interpretation which I hesitate to even verbalize. And I will tell you honestly, this is not mine. I will honestly tell you, this is something that I am involved in many discussions of this nature with many people and whatnot. And one of my scholarly friends, in a private conversation, so he will not allow me to mention his name, but I am telling you something that don't believe it's coming from me. Okay? You guys ready? Ready? Okay, don't ascribe this to me, please. Who is it not from? Good. No, from my friend it is from him. Not from don't do a double negative on me. So we were talking with a group of ulama, a group of students of knowledge, whatnot, call them whatever you will, and we're talking about this problematizing. It is a problem, wallahi, it's a problem for any rational mind. What are you going to do with Ya'juj and Ma'juj? It's not an easy thing to come around. And even he was hesitant, but he brought it up. He said, Let's look at these traditions again. We see that first and foremost, Ya'juj and Ma'juj seem to be human but not human. You see where this is heading. And they seem to be a race of people that cannot be fought. And they seem to be doing things that are bizarre, drinking up all of this water. That's not, humans can't do that. Mentally, they don't seem to be 100% there when they think they can kill the people of the heavens. This isn't normal. This isn't rational. The regular human beings alive, the followers of Isa, are so terrified of this group that they don't even want to see them. They're fleeing away from them. They will not fight them. The hadith mentions they will not be able to be fought. لا يدان أحد من قتالهم. And he mentions, if you look at the popular imagination of our times, you find a genre of literature and horror movies. You see where this is heading. And he mentions the word. And my jaw just dropped and I laughed. I said, are you serious? He goes, hear me out. Don't call them that word. For those who don't know the word, maybe the youngers can tell them later on. Don't call them that word, but the concept. What if we're talking about chemical warfare, we're talking about Dajjal, we're talking about the bird falling down, things are happening, weapons being unleashed, weapons beyond our understanding. What if the concept is there that these groups of people are human but not quite human? And they're doing all of these things, and everything just started clicking in my head. Check, 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 check. I'm like, this is so ridiculous. You will never find me saying this in a lecture, and here I am in a lecture saying it. But in any case, Allahu A'lam, frankly, it makes more sense than believing that 1 billion people are somewhere in Timbuktu or Zimbabwe or some faraway land. It makes more sense to me. Because Allahu A'lam at the end of time, also, ayas, the key point. They shall die the death of one man. How will they get gotten rid of? Allah will send a disease, some type of antivirus, some type of vaccine. I'm just saying what my friend said. Because the hadith mentions this explicitly, does it not? Allah will send something that will get them in the neck, and they will die the death of one person. So when my friend kept on going over all of these points, my laughter turned to a serious contemplation. And I said, but how do we tell the public this? Then I said, I'll just project it onto my friend, which it is true, it is coming from him. And I'll take myself out the picture so that as you laugh at my friend, but the laughter will slowly turn to contemplation. And deep down inside, you'll realize this makes a lot more sense than anything else out there. So we conclude by stating that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are a reality. We believe in them because the Quran mentions it. And that these enigmatic descriptions should not cause us doubt, because strange things will happen towards the end of times. Don't base the validity of Islam on trying to understand Ya'juj and Ma'juj. That's ridiculous. We base the validity of Islam on the Quran, on the beauty of Islam, on Tawheed, on La ilaha illallah, on the fact that it answers all the big questions of life. Islam comes with some things that may be beyond our comprehension, such as Ya'juj and Ma'juj. We just have to sami'na wa ata'na. And when it happens, all of these hadith will fit into place and we will see, oh, I get it. That's what was being referenced here. So in the end, Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. I promised you guys Q&A. Let's open the floor for some very specific questions. Yes, Bismillah. I agree with you that it doesn't make sense that the Great Wall is the Dhul Qarnayn. 100% agreed. Yeah. West and the East. ثم أتبع سببه. Maybe the North Pole. So where's Ya'juj and Ma'juj? Under the ice of the North Pole, but then the cap is melting. So as they melt, maybe this is how Ya'juj and Ma'juj are coming about. Global warming is the problem. See? It all comes back to this. Sisters, very quickly, hurry up. Yes, Bismillah. Very good. Excellent point. The Quran mentions the wall. And the Prophet mentioned this thing. And I actually brought this up in our discussions with our closed group that we have of senior ulama. Well, these are the discussions we have, by the way, right? This is what we're talking about, these types of bizarre things. We brought this up in this. And this brother's response, everything projected onto him, I'm scot-free. This brother's response, and he did respond in this manner, was that perhaps there is some type of strain of virus or whatever you want to call it, that it has been trapped up, it has been put away, but it will be released or unleashed at that point in time. And so this is the breaking of that wall, that it will affect a lot of people. Allahu A'lam. Leave it at that. Back to the brothers, yes. What's the significance of external enemy? Because the third request was, oh Allah, let not my ummah fight amongst itself. And Allah said, I'm not going to give you that. So the second was external, the third was internal. And that wasn't given. Final question of the sisters. Sisters going once, going twice. Yes, Bismillah, go ahead. And final question. Why can't our scholars say these are ayat of mutashabihat? So the ayat of mutashabihat, they have a meaning that is understood and they have a meaning that is not understood. We're dealing with the part that is understood. What do we do? Now, if you want to stop at this and say, I don't want to go beyond this, that's good for you. But what do you do to our 25-year-old college kid who comes and he keeps on saying, what do we do about this? Do we believe in these fairy tales? This is mythology. Would you believe this? What do we do to that young mind? If we tell him, you shut up and don't ask questions, we turn him away. What I'm trying to do is to save the iman of that generation. Alhamdulillah, most of us elders, we have no worries. Alhamdulillah, we're not worried about these things. Whether we understand or don't understand, we know Islam is true. We know Islam to be true. Our younger generation doesn't have that level of iman in the first place. So when these issues come, their iman is not strong enough to overcome. So they say, we're going to reject Islam. So I would rather present an alternative that is somewhat palatable, and they can then accept it rather than they reject Islam. Is that clear? Inshallah, with this we conclude and we'll continue next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Experience the beauty of Islam and bring happiness into your life with our app One Islam TV. You will have access to a wide variety of interesting documentaries, inspiring lectures, and so much more. Download One Islam TV from the Apple or Google Play Store today.